The water burned my skin. But I didn't care. It was the only thing keeping me grounded as my world spun out of control. I stood under the shower head. I shut tight, trying to drown out the ache in my chest. The one that had been there since I was 16 and first realized I loved him. Then the bathroom door creaked open, and my heart stopped. I froze, water cascading over my shoulders, as Ethan's silhouette filled the doorway. He was my best friend, my confidant, the guy who'd been by my side through every heartbreak and triumph since we were kids in suburban Ohio. At 22, he was all sharp jawlines and quiet strength, his blonde hair catching the dim light like a halo. But now, his green eyes locked on mine through the steam, and there was something new in them, something reckless, something raw. Ethan, what the hell? I stammered, my voice barely audible over the rush of water. I reached for the towel, but it was too far, hanging mockingly on the rack. My pulse thundered, half from embarrassment, half from the way he was looking at me like he was seeing me for the first time. He didn't say a word. Instead, he stepped closer, his boots leaving wet prints on the tile. His fingers moved to the buttons of his flannel shirt, undoing them one by one with a slow, deliberate calm that made my breath catch. The shirt fell open, revealing the lean lines of his chest, and I couldn't look away. This wasn't the Ethan I knew, the one who cracked bad jokes and never crossed lines. This was someone else, someone who was about to change everything. Ethan, I whispered, my voice trembling. What are you doing? He paused, his hand hovering over the last button. And for a moment, I thought he'd turn back, laugh it off like he always did when things got too real. But then his shirt hit the floor, and he stepped into the shower, fully clothed, the water soaking his jeans instantly. He was inches from me now, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off him, close enough that I could see the fear and longing warring in his eyes. I'm done hiding, he said, his voice low and rough, like it had been scraped from the bottom of his soul. I've been hiding for years. Caleb. From you. From myself. My mind reeled. Ethan, the guy who dated cheerleaders in high school, who never flinched at the homophobic slurs thrown around in the locker room, was standing here, bearing himself in a way that felt more naked than I was. I wanted to ask a million questions, but my throat was tight, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Say something, he pleaded, his voice cracking. Water dripped from his hair, trailing down his face like tears. Please, Caleb. I didn't know what to say. I'd spent years burying my feelings for him, convincing myself he was straight, that he'd never see me the way I saw him. But now, with the steam curling around us and his eyes burning into mine, I felt the walls I'd built start to crumble. I've loved you since we were 16, I admitted, the words spilling out before I could stop them. They hung in the air, heavy and fragile, and for a moment, I thought I'd ruined everything. Ethan's face softened, and a small, almost broken smile tugged at his lips. You idiot, he whispered. I've loved you since we were 15. The world tilted. I reached out, my hand trembling, and touched his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart under my fingers. It was real. This was real. But before I could process it, he leaned in, and his lips found mine. The kiss was clumsy at first, all desperation and years of pent-up longing. but it deepened into something that felt like salvation. The water poured over us, washing away the fear, the doubt, the years of silence. I clung to him, my hands fisting in his soaked jeans, afraid that if I let go, this moment would vanish. When we finally pulled apart, gasping for air, Ethan rested his forehead against mine. "I'm sorry it took me so long," he murmured. I was scared. "My dad, you know how he is." I did. Ethan's father was a retired Marine, a man whose rigid beliefs about masculinity left no room for anything else. Growing up, Ethan had walked a tightrope, trying to be the son his father wanted while hiding the parts of himself that didn't fit. I'd seen the toll it took: the late-night confessions, the way he'd shut down whenever his dad's voice boomed through the house. "I get it," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But you're here now." He nodded, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." But even as we stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Loving Ethan wasn't going to be easy, not in a small town where people talked, where his father's shadow loomed large, where my own family barely understood me. But for the first time, I felt like we could face it together. The shower kept running, the water turning cold, but neither of us cared. We'd crossed a line, and there was no going back. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Ethan's soft snores, his arms slung across my chest like it belonged there. We'd ended up in my tiny apartment bedroom after the shower, talking until dawn about everything and nothing: our fears, our hopes, the way we danced around each other for years. But as sunlight streamed through the blinds, reality crept in, sharp and unforgiving. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him, and padded to the kitchen to make coffee. My hands shook as I measured the grounds, my mind replaying last night. Ethan had kissed me. Ethan had said he loved me. But what now? We weren't just two kids sneaking beers in the woods anymore. We were adults, living in a town that didn't take kindly to people like us. The coffee machine hissed, and I heard footsteps behind me. Ethan appeared, hair mussed, wearing one of my old t-shirts that was a little too tight on him. He looked softer in the morning light, but there was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there last night. "Morning," he said, his voice rough with sleep. He hesitated, then stepped closer, brushing a kiss against my temple. It was so simple, so domestic, that it made my chest ache. "Morning," I replied, handing him a mug. "You okay?" He nodded, but his eyes were distant, staring at the steam rising from his coffee. I meant everything I said last night. "Caleb. But I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" I asked, though I already knew. "Be us. Be open. My dad's coming over this afternoon. He wants to talk about me taking over the garage." Ethan's voice was tight, and I could hear the weight of his father's expectations pressing down on him. I set my mug down, my stomach twisting. "You don't have to tell him yet. We can figure this out together." He shook his head, a bitter smile tugging at his lips. "I've been lying to him my whole life. I'm tired of it. But he's not. He's not like your mom. Caleb. He won't just accept it." My mom had been my rock when I came out at 17. She hadn't understood at first, but she'd listened, learned. and loved me fiercely through it all. Ethan's dad, though, he was the kind of man who thought love was a battlefield, not a safe haven. Then we take it slow, I said, reaching for his hand. We don't have to announce it to the world today. Ethan squeezed my hand, but his eyes were still troubled. I want to be brave for you. I just need time. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from my sister. Lila, heard Ethan's truck was at your place all night. Spill the tea. Loser. I groaned, showing Ethan the screen. He chuckled, but it was strained. Guess we're not as subtle as we thought. Lila's got a sixth sense for gossip, I said, trying to lighten the mood. But the text was a reminder that our small town had eyes everywhere. If Lila knew, it wouldn't be long before others started talking. We spent the morning tiptoeing around the big questions, sticking to safe topics like work and the upcoming town fair. But the air between us was charged, every glance and touch carrying the weight of what we'd admitted to each other. By noon, Ethan had to leave to meet his dad at the garage. Wish me luck, he said, pulling me into a quick hug, his scent pine and motor oiling yard as he stepped back. You don't need luck, I told him. You've got me. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. As he drove off, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the edge of something much bigger than us. That afternoon, I busied myself with chores, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. Around 4, my phone rang. It was Ethan, his voice shaky. Can you come to the garage? I told him. My heart sank. I'm on my way. The garage was a 10-minute drive, but it felt like an eternity. When I pulled up, Ethan was outside, leaning against his truck, his face pale. His dad stood in the doorway, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Caleb, Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. He knows. The air outside the garage was thick with the smell of oil and regret. Ethan's dad, Tom, fixed me with a stare that could have cut through steel, his graying beard doing nothing to soften the hardness in his eyes. I parked my car and stepped out, my heart hammering as I approached Ethan, who looked like he'd just been through a war. What happened? I asked, keeping my voice low. Ethan's hands were shoved deep in his pockets, his shoulders hunched like he was bracing for a blow. I told him. Ethan said, his voice raw. About us. About me. Tom stepped forward, his boots crunching on the gravel. You got something to say? Caleb. His tone was a challenge, daring me to step into the line of fire. I swallowed hard, glancing at Ethan. His eyes pleaded with me to stay calm, but I could see the fear in them, the same fear I'd felt when I came out to my own family. Mr. Harper, I started, my voice steadier than I felt. Ethan's still your son. Nothing changes that. Tom's jaw tightened. You don't get to tell me about my son. You've been filling his head with this nonsense. It's not nonsense, Ethan snapped, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. It's who I am. Dad. I'm not gonna hide it anymore. Tom's face reddened, and for a moment, I thought he might swing. But he just shook his head, disgust written in every line of his face. You're throwing your life away. Ethan, For what? For him. Ethan flinched, but he didn't back down. Yeah. For him. And for me. Because I'm done pretending to be someone I'm not. The silence that followed was deafening. Tom turned and stalked back into the garage, slamming the door behind him. Ethan let out a shaky breath, his hands trembling as he ran them through his hair. You okay? I asked, stepping closer. I wanted to pull him into my arms, but the weight of his father's words hung between us. No, he admitted, his voice breaking. But I'm glad I told him. Even if he hates me now. He doesn't hate you, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. He's just processing. Ethan gave me a weak smile. You're a terrible liar. We stood there for a moment, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the lot. I reached for his hand, and he let me take it, his fingers curling around mine like a lifeline. Let's get out of here, I said. You don't need to deal with this right now. He nodded, and we climbed into my car. As I drove, Ethan stared out the window, his silence heavy with unspoken fears. I wanted to fix this, to take away the pain, but I knew some battles had to be fought alone. We ended up at the lake on the edge of town, a place we'd gone to as kids to skip stones and dream about the future. The water was calm, reflecting the orange and pink of the sunset. Ethan sat on the shore, picking at the grass, while I sat beside him, close enough to feel his warmth, but not close enough to crowd him. I always knew he'd react like this, Ethan said finally. But it still hurts. I nodded, my throat tight. When I came out, my mom cried for a week. Not because she was mad, but because she was scared for me. Maybe your dad's scared too. Ethan snorted. He's not scared. He's ashamed. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just reached for his hand again. He leaned into me, his head resting on my shoulder. And for a while, we just sat there, watching the water ripple. I don't regret it, he said after a long silence. Telling him, loving you. I don't know how to make this work. We'll figure it out, I promised, though I had no idea how. One step at a time. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan turned to me, his eyes searching mine. You're worth it, Caleb. You know that, right? My heart swelled, and I leaned in, kissing him softly. You're worth it too. But even as we kissed, the weight of the world, his father's anger, the town's judgment, our uncertain future pressed down on us. This was love, but it was also a fight, and we were just getting started. The next few days were a tightrope walk. Ethan stayed at my place, avoiding his dad's calls and the garage where he'd spent half his life learning to fix cars. We tried to carve out moments of normalcy, cooking dinner, watching old movies, stealing kisses in the quiet of my apartment, but the tension was always there, like a storm waiting to break. One evening, as we sat on my couch, Ethan's phone lit up with a text from his mom. Your dad's not handling this well. Come home. We need to talk. He stared at the screen, his face pale, then tossed the phone onto the coffee table. You gonna go? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. I didn't want to push him, but I could see the weight of his family pulling at him. He sighed, rubbing his face. I don't know. Part of me wants to fix this. But what if he never comes around? I reached for his hand, my thumb brushing over his knuckles. Then you've got me. And my mom. And Lila, who's probably planning our wedding already. He laughed. A small, broken sound that made my heart ache. Yeah. She texted me yesterday asking if we're official yet. That's Lila, I said, grinning. But seriously, Ethan, you don't have to face him alone. I'll go with you. He looked at me, his eyes softening. You do that? For you. Anything. The next morning, we drove to Ethan's parents' house, a modest ranch-style home on the edge of town. My stomach churned as we pulled into the driveway. Tom's truck parked ominously in the garage. Ethan gripped my hand as we walked to the door, his palms sweaty against mine. His mom, Ellen, answered, her face a mix of worry and relief. She hugged Ethan tightly, then gave me a small, hesitant smile. Come in, boys. Tom was in the living room, sitting in his recliner like a king on a throne. His eyes flicked to our joined hands, and his mouth tightened, but he didn't say anything. Ellen gestured for us to sit on the couch, her hands fluttering nervously. Ethan, she started, her voice soft. We just want to understand. It's a lot. Ethan nodded, his jaw tight. I know, Mom. I didn't plan to tell you like this, but it's who I am. I love Caleb. I've loved him for years. Tom made a low, gruff sound, like he was choking on his own anger. You think this is easy for us? To hear our son say he's like this? Like what? Dad. Ethan's voice was sharp, his eyes blazing. Gay? In love? Happy? For once. Tom's face reddened. But before he could respond, Ellen put a hand on his arm. Tom, let him talk. Ethan took a deep breath, his hand tightening around mine. I've spent my whole life trying to be the son you wanted. The one who'd take over the garage. Marry a nice girl. Give you grandkids. But that's not me. And I'm done pretending. The room was silent, the air thick with unspoken words. I could feel Ethan trembling beside me, and I squeezed his hand, trying to pour all my strength into that small gesture. Tom leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. You're choosing this over your family. I'm not choosing anything, Ethan said, his voice breaking. I'm just trying to live. Ellen's eyes filled with tears, and she reached for Ethan's other hand. We love you, Ethan. We just need time. Tom stood abruptly, storming out of the room. The slam of the back door echoed through the house, leaving a hollow ache in its wake. Ellen squeezed Ethan's hand, her voice trembling. I'll talk to him. He's stubborn, but he loves you. Ethan nodded, but his eyes were distant, like he was already bracing for the worst. As we left the house, I pulled him into a hug, feeling the weight of his pain in the way he clung to me. We'll get through this, I whispered, though I wasn't sure how. All I knew was that I'd fight for him, no matter what came next. The town fair arrived a week later. A burst of color and noise that usually brought out the best in our small Ohio community. But this year, it felt like a battlefield. Ethan and I walked through the crowded fairgrounds. The smell of fried dough and cotton candy heavy in the air, trying to act like nothing had changed. But whispers followed us, heads turning as we passed. "They know," Ethan muttered, his hand brushing against mine, but not quite taking it. "Lila's big mouth. Probably." I nudged him, trying to lighten the mood. Or maybe we're just that obvious. He gave me a small smile, but it faded when we spotted a group of guys from our high school days near the Ferris wheel. Jake, the unofficial leader, had always been a jerk, but now his smirk was laced with something darker. "Well, look who's cozy," Jake called out, loud enough to draw attention. "Didn't know you two were a thing." Ethan stiffened beside me, his jaw tight. I stepped forward, my voice calm but firm. "Got a problem, Jake?" Jake's eyes narrowed, but before he could say anything, Lila appeared out of nowhere, her blonde ponytail bouncing. "Back off, Jake," she snapped. "Nobody asked for your opinion." The crowd around us quieted, and for a moment, I thought Jake might push it. But he just shrugged, muttering something under his breath, and walked away with his buddies. Lila turned to us, her eyes blazing. "You guys okay?" "Yeah," Ethan said, though his voice was tight. "Thanks, Lila." She grinned, linking her arm through mine. "Come on, let's get some funnel cake. My treat." The rest of the fair was a blur of bright lights and forced smiles. Ethan stayed close, but I could feel the weight of every stare, every whisper. By the time we got back to my apartment, he was quiet, his eyes distant. "You don't have to stay here," I said, sitting beside him on the couch. "If it's too much, you can go back to your place." He shook his head, his hand finding mine. "I don't want to be anywhere else. I just hate that this is so hard." I leaned my head against his shoulder, my heart aching for him. "It won't always be like this. People will get used to it." "Will they?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Or will we always be the town's gossip?" I didn't have an answer, so I just held him, letting the silence speak for us. That night, we fell asleep tangled together, the world outside forgotten for a few precious hours. The next morning, Ethan got a call from his mom. Tom had agreed to meet him for coffee. Just the two of them. Ethan looked torn, hope and fear warring in his eyes. "Go," I said, squeezing his shoulder. "He's trying. That's something." Ethan nodded, but as he left, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking a razor's edge. I spent the day cleaning my apartment, trying to keep my mind off the what-ifs. When Ethan came back, his face was unreadable. "How'd it go?" I asked, my heart in my throat. He sank onto the couch, rubbing his face. He didn't yell, didn't disown me. But he said he needs time to fix his head. Whatever that means. I sat beside him, my hand resting on his knee. That's progress, right? Maybe, he said, but his voice was heavy. He asked me not to tell anyone else yet. Said it'd embarrass the family. Anger flared in my chest, but I pushed it down. This isn't about him, Ethan. It's about you. He looked at me, his eyes searching. What if I'm not strong enough for this? You are, I said fiercely, and I'm right here with you. He leaned into me, his breath shaky. I don't deserve you, Caleb. I kissed his forehead, my heart full and breaking all at once. Yes, you do. Weeks passed, and Ethan and I settled into a fragile rhythm. We kept our relationship quiet, not out of shame, but to avoid the town's relentless scrutiny. But secrets have a way of slipping out, and ours was no exception. By mid-autumn, the whispers had grown louder, fueled by Jake and his crew at the local bar. One night, we decided to brave the bar, craving a sense of normalcy. We sat in a corner booth, sharing a pitcher of beer, our knees touching under the table. For a while, it felt like we were just two guys in love, untouchable. But then Jake sauntered over, his smirk sharp enough to cut. Got a question for you, Ethan, he said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. When you decide to switch teams. The bar went quiet, all eyes on us. Ethan's face paled, but his voice was steady. I didn't switch anything, Jake. I'm just me. Jake laughed, a cruel, grating sound. Yeah, well, just you is gonna make things real interesting around here. I stood, my hands clenched. Walk away, Jake. He held up his hands, mock surrender, but his eyes gleamed with malice. Just saying, Caleb. Small towns don't forget. As he walked off, Ethan grabbed my hand, pulling me back down. Don't, he said softly. He's not worth it. But the damage was done. The bar felt suffocating, every glance a judgment. We left early, the night air cold against our skin as we walked to my car. I hate this, Ethan said, his voice breaking. I hate that I care what they think. I pulled him into a hug, my arms tight around him. They don't matter. We do. But even as I said it, I felt the weight of their stares, their words, pressing down on us. That night, Ethan stayed over again, but he was restless, tossing and turning until dawn. The next day, I got a call from my mom. Caleb. Honey, I heard about the bar. You okay? Yeah. I lied, glancing at Ethan, who was staring out the window. We're fine. You don't sound fine, she said, her voice gentle but firm. Bring Ethan over for dinner tonight. No arguments. I smiled despite myself. Yes, ma'am. Dinner at my mom's was a bomb for both of us. She made her famous lasagna, and Lila kept the conversation light, teasing us about our newlywed glow. Ethan relaxed for the first time in days, even laughing when Lila recounted her latest dating disaster. But as we drove back to my place, Ethan's mood shifted again. Your family's amazing, he said quietly. I wish mine could be like that. They will be, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. Give them time. He didn't respond, but his hand found mine, holding on like it was the only thing keeping him afloat. The next morning, Ethan got a text from his mom. Your dad wants to see you. He's ready to talk. My heart lifted. But Ethan's face was guarded. I don't know if I can do this again, he admitted, his voice barely audible. You don't have to, I said. But if you want to, I'll be there. He nodded, and we drove to his parents' house, the silence between us heavy with hope and dread. Tom was waiting in the garage, his hands stained with grease, his expression unreadable. Ethan, he said, his voice gruff. We need to sort this out. The garage smelled of oil and metal, a familiar comfort that did nothing to ease the tension between Ethan and his dad. Tom leaned against a workbench, his arms crossed, while Ethan stood rigid, his hands shoved in his pockets. I stayed near the door, ready to step in if things got ugly. I don't understand you, Tom said finally, his voice low but steady. But I'm trying. Your mom, she's been on me about it. Says I'm pushing you away. Ethan's eyes flickered with surprise, but he didn't speak. Tom sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I raised you to be strong, Ethan, to be a man. It doesn't fit with what I know. It's not about fitting, Ethan said, his voice quiet but firm. It's about being honest. Tom's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. For the first time, he seemed to be listening. Ethan took a deep breath, his words spilling out like they'd been bottled up for years. I've been scared my whole life, Dad. Scared you'd hate me. Scared I'd lose you. But I can't keep lying. I love Caleb. I want a life with him. And I want you to be part of it. But not if it means hiding who I am. Tom's eyes flicked to me, then back to Ethan. You think it's easy for me? Hearing this, knowing what people will say? I know it's not, Ethan said. But I'm not asking you to understand it all at once. I'm just asking you to try. The silence stretched, heavy and fragile. Finally, Tom nodded. A small, grudging gesture. I don't know how to do this, Ethan. But I don't want to lose you. Ethan's shoulders sagged, relief and exhaustion washing over him. That's all I need to hear. Dad. Tom looked at me, his expression still guarded. You take care of him. Caleb. He's all I've got. I will. I promised, my voice thick with emotion. As we left the garage, Ethan grabbed my hand, his grip tight. Thank you, he whispered, for being here. Always, I said, pulling him into a hug. For the first time, I felt a spark of hope that we might actually make this work. But the town wasn't done with us. The next day, Ethan found a note taped to his truck. Fags don't belong here. The words were scrawled in angry black ink, and they hit like a punch to the gut. Ethan crumpled the note, his face pale but resolute. They can't scare me off, he said, but his voice trembled. I took the note from his hand, tearing it in half. They're cowards, and we're stronger than they'll ever be. He nodded, but the fear in his eyes lingered. That night, we made a plan. We'd leave town. Not forever, but for a while somewhere we could breathe, where we could be us without looking over our shoulders. My mom offered to help us find a place, and Lila promised to visit every chance she got. As we packed our bags, Ethan looked at me, his eyes soft. "You sure about this, Caleb? Leaving everything behind?" "I'm sure about you," I said, kissing him softly. "The rest we'll figure out." 3 months later, Ethan and I stood in the doorway of our new apartment in Columbus, a small but cozy place with a view of the city skyline. The move hadn't been easy, leaving our families, our hometown, the lives we'd known, but it felt like a fresh start. The hate note had been the final push, a reminder that staying would mean fighting a battle we weren't ready for. We unpacked slowly, filling the space with pieces of our Selva's Me books, Ethan's tools, a photo of us at the lake from years ago. Every box unpacked felt like a step towards something new, something ours. One evening, as we sat on our tiny balcony, sipping cheap wine and watching the city lights, Ethan turned to me, his eyes bright. "I never thought I'd get here," he said. "A place where I could just be." I reached for his hand, my heart full. "We're here now, and we're going to be okay." He leaned in, kissing me softly, and for the first time, there was no fear in it, no weight of the world pressing down. It was just us, two guys in love, building a life together. Back in our hometown, things were slowly changing. Ethan's mom called every week, sharing updates about Tom's reluctant progress. He'd started asking questions, trying to understand, even if it was in his own gruff way. Lila visited often, bringing her chaos and laughter, reminding us that we weren't alone. The world wasn't perfect. We still got stares sometimes, still felt the sting of judgment. But we had each other, and that was enough. The night Ethan walked into my shower, he'd changed everything, not just for us, but for the people around us. We'd dared to love, to be honest. And in doing so, we'd started to carve out a space where others could do the same. As we stood on that balcony, Ethan's arm around my shoulders, I realized that this was what love was, not just the passion or the romance, but the courage to face the world together, to fight for a place where you belong. And no matter what came next, we'd face it side by side, unapologetically us.